Morning guys, we're on Hebrews chapter 10 and we're reading from verse 1. For the law, since it has only a shadow of the good things to come, and not the very form of things, can never by the same sacrifices which they offer continually year by year make perfect those who draw near. And so again we see the word drawing near. We all want to draw near to God, and sin separates us from God. And it's only through Jesus that we can draw near to God. That word shadow is it's pointing to something. It's not actually the real thing. If you consider a shadow of a tree, it's just an outline on the ground from the sun. But if you follow that shadow, it brings you to the real thing. And so in Colossians 2 verse 16 it says, talks about types and shadows, but the reality is Christ. The substance is Jesus. And so the actual types and pictures and shadows are really from the Old Testament, are pointing to Jesus. And so in Galatians 3 it talks about that these things, the law, is a tutor, or something that teaches us or shows us that we're a sinner, that leads us to Christ. Let's just read that in Galatians 3 verse 24. So then the law was our guardian until Christ came, or a tutor that leads us to Christ, in order that we might be justified by faith. Verse 25. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian or a tutor, for in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith. And so these things show us that we are sinners, that we're separated from God. We can't draw near in our own strength, but through Christ we can have an absolute clear conscience that every sin, past, present, future, has been dealt with. Verse 2, otherwise would they not have ceased to be offered, because the worshippers, having once been cleaned, would no longer have conscience of sins. So if it did work, all those sacrifices of goats and sheep and all the different cleanliness laws, everything, if it worked, they wouldn't have to keep on doing it. But every day they'd have to pay for some sin, and they knew it would never actually completely delivered them. Verse 3, but in those sacrifices there's a reminder of sins year by year. Year after year they remembered that they are imperfect. They can't draw near to God. The relationship with God has been destroyed because of sin. Verse 5, therefore when he comes into the world, he says, sacrifice and offering you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. In whole burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me, to do your will, O God. And that's exact quote from Psalm 40. And so God doesn't desire sacrifices. He desires a change of the heart, which can only come through knowing Jesus. And so it all becomes an aspect of obedience, aspects of humility, of knowing God personally, and something that he does within the heart more than these outward regulations. Let me just read Psalm 40, where the quote is from, verse 6. Sacrifice and meal offerings you have not desired, my ears you have opened, burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. Then I said, behold, I come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me, I delight to do your will, O God. Your law is written within my heart. And so God now writes the law in our hearts. He does a change, takes out that heart of stone, he makes it into a heart of flesh, and he makes us love him and obey him because we want to, because our hearts have been changed. And so let's just remember that today. And all this comes through knowing Jesus and being in him and allowing him to do a work in our hearts.